Welcome everyone to Cornell Keynotes. Today we have a special show lined up for you as eCornell has once again joined forces with our long-standing enterprise partners at AT&T to get deep into customer centricity today. Thanks to this partnership, we are joined by AT&T's Josh Goodell, who is Vice President of Product Experience at AT&T Consumer. And here on the Cornell side, we've got Professor Stijn van Osselaer from the Cornell SC Johnson College of Business. Stijn is a faculty author of the Online Marketing Strategy Cornell Certificate Program. A lot of what we're going to be discussing today maps directly to a lot of the content that's covered in Stijn's courses. We are so happy to bring these two experts together to explore customer centricity and get into it. We're going to be hitting things from the industry and the academic side, which I think makes for a winning formula for keynotes here. So I want to welcome you, Josh and Stijn. Great to have you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
All right, they're ready to go. Viewers, we are going to take your questions in the chat. We've got a lot to talk about ourselves, but we are interested in your perspective and some of the use cases and challenges that you are seeing out there as it relates to customer centricity. So as expected, enter your questions in the chat. I'll get them here and we'll try to hit them in the order that we get them. We're just going to take a few because this is a very dense, rich conversation we're going to be having today. Also, heads up in the chat for resources and useful URLs, including links to Professor van Osselaer's courses and certificate programs, and for our AT&T friends in the audience, which are numerable, we know this, there'll be links to eCornell's learning portal dropped throughout. So you'll see some URLs dropped in there for both the AT&T folks and some of our general audience friends as well. So when we do finish today, audience, I do need your help. We're going to ask you to just hang around for just a second. Give us some super quick feedback on how we do today. Your survey data is critical to us, and we rely heavily on the input of our viewers to determine everything we do here at Keynotes. So we will take your questions throughout. Let's get right into it. Gentlemen, I'm going to begin with you, Stijn. So can you share your perspective on what customer centricity means to you? And I'm talking about both in a broad philosophical kind of way, but also what it means practically for an organization, how it's done.
So basically, what customer centricity is a mindset and a strategy where you really try to deeply understand your customers, focus on satisfying their needs and giving them a great experience, which hopefully should lead to a mutually beneficial, long-lasting relationship. So if you want to think about, like, why is that so important? Maybe a good way to answer that is this quote from Jeff Bezos at Amazon. He says that proactively delighting customers earns trust, which earns more business from those customers, even in new business arenas. Take a long-term view and the interests of customers and shareholders align. One advantage, perhaps a somewhat subtle one, of a customer-driven focus is that it aids a certain type of proactivity. When we're at our best, we don't wait for external pressures. We are internally driven to improve our services, adding benefits and features before we have to. There's two important elements in here. First is to delight the customer. You have to remember that your customer is the only place in the business where you actually make money. Everything else is cost. So it's really important to make sure that that customer is happy, which requires a relentless focus on that customer. Who are they? What do they need? What do they want? How do they make decisions? What makes them tick? So basically, you need to make delighting customers part of your DNA. You don't wait for your competitors to do something, but you continuously try to improve your proposition to your customers. The second element is to take a long-term perspective. So you think of customers as a relationship that you invest in and it pays off over time rather than a one-time transaction. Can you show the next slide? Let me give you an example here. Let's say that we're talking about an online delivery service for groceries like Instacart or Fresh Direct. The relationship starts with pure cost, right? You have to advertise to get these new customers. So there's an acquisition cost up front in the first period. Then when you sell to them for the first time, you have to basically set up the account, things go wrong, there are some costs there. The first time they may not buy much. They may not trust you to deliver good food, for example, or they decide that they'll still get the toilet paper from Target. And they are probably not going to want to pay a big price premium the first time. You may actually have to give them a welcome discount for them to try your product the first time. But when that customer is satisfied, the next time the account is all set up, so your selling effort goes down, they're going to buy fruit, they're going to try buying fruit from you too, and the toilet paper, so there's increased usage. You don't have to give them that discount anymore. And in fact, if you raise your prices, they'll probably stick with you. And if they're happy, there's going to be referrals. And so what you see is that over time, that relationship becomes more and more profitable because your customer is really happy about what you're trying to do. So that's why this is important. And I think Josh has a lot to say about this topic.
I see Josh Goodell nodding over there. So Josh, you're ready to go.
There's so many good nuggets in what Stijn just shared. So first of all, as you mentioned, Chris, I'm a product leader at AT&T. If we could move to the next slide. And I would say a good product leader has to have three things. One, customer centricity. Two, a handle on the financials, i.e. profitability. And three, you have to be grounded in the technology. It is in that order, by the way. And one of the things that we focus on is starting with the customer, period. And by the way, Stijn, I'm going to do this. We didn't rehearse it, but when I stand in front of my team, I say start with the customer, and then they say period. So we start with the customer,
period.
That's it. And culturally, that's where you start every single conversation. It doesn't matter what the conversation's about. And it's about putting the customer at the center of your decision-making, your leadership, your strategy, your operations, and ultimately understanding the customer's wants, their needs, and ideally creating an emotional connection to the product that you sell. And you want to think about, how does a customer feel when they use your product or services? Do they feel confident? Do they feel empowered? Do they have peace of mind? In the business that I'm in, that is what we aspire to deliver in the experience that we desire for our customers. Human-centered design, by the way, is called out specifically here because this is a discipline. It's a scientific discipline that function resides within the product team now, so that we are designing the right types of experiences for our customers. We'll get into a little bit more of the mechanics of what that looks like in later in the presentation, but this is really what it's all about. Start with the customer. Stijn, that was a lead.
Period.
Thank you. Come on. So moving on, I loved your slide, by the way. If we can move one forward here. I loved your slide on the profits through the lens of one customer. And when I think about, and I talk about things like emotional connection and having empathy, some people may think that sounds soft, and there is some art and some science to it, but there's hard math to this. And when we think about things like lifetime value, there's an academic equation to it. And Stijn, maybe you can talk about the academic equation for a minute, and then I can speak about how we apply that within the business here.
Absolutely. And it's, I hear you. I mean, listen, all these soft things, in the end, they come into your profit function. And so they don't remain soft. They're actually really important. And so, but, you know, if what this is all about is about building mutually beneficial, profitable relationships, then what you need to do is and that's not just academic, it's practical too, is you have to come up with a metric for how profitable a particular customer relationship is. And so that's the construct of lifetime value, the concept of lifetime value. What is lifetime value? It's really not that complicated. It's basically, what's the profit I'm going to get every period? What's the margin I'm going to get every period, every year, for example, multiplied by how many of those years there will be, how long somebody will be a customer, And then basically you subtract the acquisition cost, which is the upfront cost that you need to make to get this person to become your customer, for example, by having to advertise upfront. And so this is impacted by a bunch of other metrics, like predicted lifetime depends on churn, right? How many of your customers do you lose each month or each year? Your margin depends on your revenue minus your costs. And then acquisition cost is all these different costs that you have up front to get that customer. And so in the eCornell certificate courses, you get a lot of practice with this. We provide a lot of Excel templates. We also look at this, by the way, not just at the average level, but we also look at it by segment, where we look at different groups of customers and look at what the lifetime value is for these different groups, not just absolutely, but also relative to your upfront investment, where we look at metrics like lifetime return on investment and LTV over CAC, which is used a lot in the tech industry to decide whether or not to go ahead with a new product. And then for acquisition costs, we also look at these more complex situations where it's not just here's some Facebook advertising, here's how many customers we have, but for example, a multi-step process where you're trying to sell an industrial product or a very complicated business-to-business software solution. So yeah, back to you, Josh.
So there's an academic element to this. I will say that we apply the discipline of lifetime value at AT&T, and it's not a one-time event, by the way. We are always looking at this. There are a few key points that I would call out. First of all customers are not the same. So segmentation is really, really important, and understanding how you want to stratify the different populations. So for example, we have customers that we call ahead of the curve. They're more forward-leaning from a technology perspective. Others that are more family-oriented. And so creating solutions and understanding solutions for the family is different for that group. We look at 55 and above customers. They buy differently. We look at frugal by choice. Very important words there. That doesn't mean they're cheap. It means they're frugal by choice. All of these different cohorts and segments have nuances. And as we look at lifetime value, you've got to look at each of these segments and cohorts. Also understanding what is the time to break even. Each of these segments have different profitabilities. They have different lifetime events that play out over time. And we look at those types of events. So for example, we know early in the life cycle, a customer that adopts auto pay early is going to have a longer tenure. They're going to have a lower churn and over time, a higher LTV. Later in the life cycle, that's less relevant, and it will be more relevant to look at, are they getting a competitive offer from somebody else? So these things are different depending on where they are in the life cycle. And then we look at things like churn and influencers of churn. One big thing that we focus on is how do we get our customers to have both our connectivity services, as an example, fiber and mobility. We find that those customers have a higher LTV, a higher net promoter score, lower churn, and we look at how do we enable that by truly differentiating the services so that they want both of them. So anyway, we do this. We look at all of the different products through the lens of segmentation. By the way, there is a technology element of this as you start to think about the permutations that you've got to do here. Machine learning is a part of how we actually execute on this and critical to ensuring that you've got a repeatable process that will yield results over time.
Yeah, I'm super impressed with the stuff you guys are doing at really doing lifetime value at the individual level now. That's super impressive.
Great perspective from both of you. Thank you for the back and forth. And thank you for some of the questions that are coming in. Yes, we will take some audience questions shortly here. So yeah, we just learned about segmentation, lifetime value. Great insight from both of you. I want to ask you, when you've seen, what have you seen happen when customer centricity is done right? Hitting all the boxes, doing all the stuff right. When a company is actually become truly customer centric? What does that look like? Any examples? Let's start with you, Josh.
Yeah, so the great thing about your question is there's actually a measure of this. It's called customer obsession. And there's a metric that is a combination of 9 kind of attributes. It looks at culture of the company. It looks at how they get feedback and listen to their customers. It looks at the sustainability of their commitment to the customer over long periods of time. And they've looked at how those companies perform over a fairly long period. In this case, what's shown on this chart is a 10-year return on investment. If you had invested, let's say, $10,000 over a 10-year period, in this case, it's 2013 through 2022, you would have a 6x return on that investment for companies that are deemed customer obsessed. So the top line results are really, really impressive. And again, it starts at looking at the customer, understanding the customer. And if you just think about what we've talked about, it totally makes sense. Better experiences result in longer LTVs, which result in better financial return for the companies. And as you see a few of the logos on here, I'm sure many of the audience understand why these companies are considered customer obsessed. You've got Costco, Apple, Nike, Amazon, et cetera. Stijn, I'm sure in your studies, you've probably identified 1 or 2 as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples. I mean, if you think about streaming, for example, music streaming, Spotify, or video streaming, Netflix, both of these go up against much larger companies, against giants. But because they're so good at figuring out what their customers are looking for, what their customers' preferences are, using very advanced analytics, they basically outperform tremendously. When you look at Netflix's churn, it's about 2% per month. Hulu and Disney Plus are about 5%. What that means is that over a year, Netflix loses 20% of its customers, whereas the others lose over 43% of their customers. That's more than twice as much. That's a huge difference. Another example I really like is the maker of this, Patagonia. They're really good at understanding what their customers' values are and what their customers find important, right? In this case, sustainability, social responsibility, and that basically permeates everything they do. They make durable clothing that reduces waste by just lasting longer. They're often made with recycled materials. They facilitate reuse through their one-wear store. You can send in your clothes for repair, and that's why a fleece jacket from Patagonia retails at $160 and is almost never on sale, versus $40 to $50 for the versions from REI or Columbia.
You know, Stijn, what I love about that example is it reinforces the value of an emotional connection.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about that earlier in the presentation. They've done such a great job of capturing that emotional connection with customers, because customers know that when they're buying from Patagonia, 1, they're buying quality, but 2, they're buying from a company that actually really cares about the environment and is giving 1% back to it. So it's a great example of that linkage.
Speaking of emotional connection, so I want to ask both of you. Stijn, I'll begin with you. How do you strike a balance between standardization for efficiency versus personalization, right? Which can in many ways bring about more customer satisfaction, but you do have to strike a balance. How do you think about those two dynamics?
Yeah, it really depends on 2 things. One is, how big are the differences between your different customers in terms of what they need and what their preferences are, and the cost of personalization. And so we sometimes tend to overestimate how different people's preferences really are. A great example of that is a company called The Yes. Doesn't exist anymore. What they did is they came up with these very sophisticated algorithms to give completely individual recommendations as to what clothing you should be buying. It turned out that this company failed mostly because many people do not really have very strong individualized preferences. They want to know what's in fashion that season, and they don't all want to get individualized recommendations. So many people actually want the same things. Another great example, you can probably find a YouTube video of Ellen DeGeneres doing a segment about this, is when Bic tried to market ballpoints, pens that were blue or pink for men and women. Men and women really don't want different ballpoint pens. They want the same pens. So what we do in the eCornell certificate programs is that we really assess these differences in needs and preferences using what we call the importance performance model. And what that model does is it looks at what are the different groups of people who might potentially be interested in my product, and what benefits are they looking for, and how important is each of these benefits. And so that will tell you whether you can satisfy multiple segments or multiple groups with the same product, or whether you actually need to customize your product for each of these different groups. On the cost side, in the end, it's really all about whether the customer is willing to pay enough extra for this customized product to make it worth your cost. And so what we do in the certificate programs is that we have a module on pricing where we look into in detail as to what are some methodologies you can use to find out how much people are really willing to pay extra for that piece of customization.
Josh, I want to go over to you. What is the how do you think about these things? You know, in our pregame huddle, you were talking about the customer's value experiences. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So first of all, the balance between standard and more personalized is interesting. In my career, I've had the pleasure of leading enterprise product teams and consumer product teams. Enterprise being large businesses, consumer obviously, or people like you and I. And the difference is really striking. On the enterprise side, it was more about custom. It was more about flexibility, agility. It was more about global reach. On the consumer side, it's about simplicity. It's about reliability. It's about price. And where, you know, on the enterprise side, it was global reach. And on the consumer side, it may be just connecting the devices in the home, very local. And I always thought about these as being very different, but the reality is increasingly on the consumer side, you have to do both. You have to deliver a really compelling standard solution. And there is a way, and is a key word, to deliver personalized solutions. And what that really means is delivering the right message to the right customer at the right time, and doing so in a way that it feels personal for them. The base capabilities may be very similar from one customer to another, but if you think about how you're speaking to and how you're reaching and when you're reaching that customer, you can really make a difference. And I thought the stat that was on this chart was really important, in that it's 88% of customers say the experience is just as important as the product itself. And so you have to think about both of these elements. And I think you can do both, but it's not easy. And your question didn't ask about the how behind it, but just know I have to think a lot about the how, and it requires modern tools for your human agents that are interfacing with customers, the front end tools. It requires modern back end tools. At the BSS layer, it requires digital tools. So to deliver that right message, right solution, right time is absolutely possible. But you have to think about the technology that underpins all of it to do it in a way that's seamless.
Yeah, exactly. Stijn, did you have a point? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce that. And one of the things that I hear Josh saying is that it's not all or nothing, right? You very often might be able to satisfy a lot of different people with a single physical product or a single service. But you might customize the communication a little bit more, for example. So it's not all or none. You can keep some things the same for multiple groups of people, and then for other things, you might even go to the individual level.
So how does this figure into the next point we were going to get into was customer centricity as it plays out in the development of a product or a product launch? I mean, Josh, how do you do this at AT&T?
Yeah, so I think about this. First of all, it's important to understand that customers decide to purchase based on emotion a lot of the time, their wants, their needs, etc. I'm a perfect example of this, by the way. If you saw the car that I drove on the weekend, you'd say that that car is not rational. It gets bad gas mileage. It drives terribly. It's not particularly good looking. It's a Jeep Gladiator, by the way. But I love it because it connects with me emotionally. And you just have to remember, customers, that's how they buy. And so part of this for us, the challenge is understanding the wants, the needs, the emotions, the stereotypes of our customers. And a lot of this gets really deep into UX research, which is not the same thing as market research, by the way. But UX research really peels back the onion and really asks the question, what problem are we trying to solve for the customer? And typically it's going to fall into one of three categories. One category is it's not a problem, it's not important. And it's good to know that. Learn that early so you can move on. Second category could be, yeah, it's a problem, but they're satisfied with the solution today. That doesn't mean you don't focus there. There are lots of examples of product development that did this type of situation, took this type of situation and really created a differentiated experience. So for example, if you think about the old Walkman, I don't know, Stijn, did you ever have a Walkman?
Absolutely.
So the Walkman went to basically the iPod, right? The iPod went to the iPhone. That's an example of, hey, it was good enough, but because of specifically what Apple did with their really tight ecosystem evolution, they took a problem that people were satisfied with and totally changed the paradigm altogether. The third scenario is basically you got a problem and customers are not satisfied with it. That is where there's massive opportunity. Examples of where that's played out are, if you think about what's happened with the disruption of the taxi industry, probably one of the better examples, which continues to kind of play out over time. And so if you really start to apply the discipline of UX research and design, you start to get into some of the elements, which is on the right-hand side of the chart here, which is prototyping, learning by putting those prototypes in front of customers. You take that feedback, you then iterate, you then confirm solution fit. Really important step, by the way. Failure in every step prior to solution fit is okay. It's actually welcomed. Failure at prototype or at learn is cheap. Failure once you go beyond that and you actually build the solution is expensive. So these steps are really, really, really important to follow. And then once you launch, whatever it is, you monitor the results and you continue to iterate. You don't just launch these things and forget about them. You continue to iterate on those solutions over time.
I want to get further into costs. Stijn, I want to ask you, how might one balance the immediate and significant costs of customer-centric initiatives with the long-term customer lifetime value, right? So, I mean, what metrics do you look at?
So what you do is you'll actually go through your lifetime value metric, right? Because that extra cost of customer-centric initiatives goes into your margin, right? It's the negative component of your margin. And so if you have an idea of what that component is, then you basically can mathematically solve and see how much you need to reduce your churn, or how much you need to increase your price, or how much you need to reduce your acquisition cost to basically have that be a net positive. And so that would be the starting point. But as Josh said, you would also try to test and prototype early so that if you fail, if it's not a net monetary positive, that you would basically stop it early. I see that Josh is
it's
queuing up another slide.
it's a great point, and I mean, this is a paradigm shift in the product development world. And there are people that have written books on this. There's a great book called Transformed out there that if you haven't picked up, I recommend going and getting it. But the point I'd like to make on this is that, the historic approach is kind of linear, and you define, you develop, you deploy. That may take you 18 months. So you better be really, really smart in your definition phase. And then you really start measuring the customer experience once you deploy in the historic approach. The future approach, a more modern approach to doing customer-centric product development, is really what's outlined at the bottom, where you do pitch, you mock up, you prototype. And by the way, in the early phases of this, you're going to be looking at things like hedonics, intention to use, very specific metrics. Then you get into beta, where you're actually putting the solution in front of customers. You may be looking at things like system usability scores and those types of metrics. And then you get into an MVP phase. And at that point, you may be looking at things like customer effort, customer satisfaction, CSAT. And then you get to statistical significance, and ultimately you start looking at Net Promoter Score or NPS. But so what you measure across each of these is a little bit differently, but the point is the learning and the customer feedback loop starts very, very early in the process. And as I mentioned earlier, failure is okay. If you fail at pitch and mock-up or prototype or even beta, that's okay. What's not okay is failing as you get to the far right of this, because now you spent a lot of time, energy, and money. And so it's ideally you're working those learnings in. So by the time you're at MVP, it's a pretty good solution.
Stijn, I see you nodding in agreement there. Any comments on that?
No, absolutely, absolutely, and I think that segs really nice into the next thing that we're going to discuss, which is about go-to-market strategy, where this of course comes in all the time, right? And you wanna fail fast. That's essential. Otherwise, it gets very, very expensive. And
hey,
it's
Josh, sorry, go ahead.
And it's super customer centric, of course, because as Josh said, you're talking to the customer all the time during this process.
Yeah, Stijn, this is an example. As a product leader, I've lived this, and an example of a product that we launched where we learned the hard way. Actually, it wasn't the hard way. We implemented the process that was on the bottom of that chart. And with this product, which is basically, in essence, we call it internet backup. So for our fiber customers that have our mobility service, in the event of like a cable cut, the phone actually becomes the access to the internet, which is really awesome. So there's continuity in all of the connected devices within the home. And the setup for this is pretty easy. It's 4 steps. And then in the event of an outage, we let the customer know that, hey, there's an outage in your area, but we've got your back. And you've got continuity of service because of this feature. This is kind of the current state of this feature. If I had shown you the prototype version of this, it would be a very different picture and virtually unusable by the customer. And we learned that we had to simplify it dramatically so that customers could get through the process easily, and also let the customers know that the feature is there, so that they value it. And so internet backup is a great example of us learning early in the cycle, learning what was not an acceptable experience, and then removing that friction. And then ultimately now it's a great example of a service that is relatively frictionless and differentiated in the market. And by the way, we'll continue to iterate on it. There's more friction to be removed from this process. So the learning is ongoing.
Hey Stein, over to you. I want you to tell us a little bit about how you think about go-to-market strategy, maybe as it relates, piggybacking on what Josh has just told us here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of buzz these days about go-to-market strategy, which is the idea that uh, how do you take a business idea or a prototype to market? How do you do that? And so the eCornell marketing strategy certificates are basically set up to teach you how to do that. And so if you look at this Eiffel Tower here, that's basically the structure of the course. We start thinking about tooling you up with marketing analytics and an understanding of customer behavior. Then you think about what are the different groups of customers that potentially might want to buy my product. And we do what's called a rich segment description for each of those groups. Also thinking about kind of how do they make their decisions, where they get their information, who are they, what do they want. Then next is the targeting step, where we, based on this deep analysis of each of these groups, we look at their needs and wants, and we also look at how your product performs relative to the competition to decide which of the groups you're going to target, right? Because we don't want to be everything to everybody, because that's going to fail. What we need to do is we need to concentrate for each product or each version of a product on one group of customers that we're going to try to completely satisfy and satisfy better than the competition could. Now, once we've got that group, we start really designing everything for that group to really maximize the utility for that group. And before we go into specifics there, what we do is positioning. We try to give that customer group an idea in their head of what our product's all about and how that's different from the competition. Once we have that middle part, that's like the most important. Then we can go into more specific decisions about product design, which is where a lot of what Josh was talking about comes in, right? Where you basically really dial down the features. We also think about distribution channels, like what's the optimal way of distributing a product to this particular group of customers, which, by the way, often involves both an online component and an offline component, as Josh is very well aware of, because they really play this multiple distribution channel, this omni-channel strategy very well. We look at pricing. How do you price for a particular group? Not just the level of the price, but also how do you structure price, right? Is it a subscription or not? And then finally, which is only the last part of this course, and so not what people often think marketing is communication. And that's where you really look at how do you help people throughout the customer decision journey. And let's go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about the customer decision journey.
Hey, Stein, real quick, can I interject on your last slide real quick?
Absolutely.
So I didn't pick up on this previously, but basically you've got a Maslow pyramid of health here.
In a way,
I hadn't connected, but at the foundation of all of it is customer behavior. And it's kind of like my entry slide, which, basically start with the customer. Period. That was for you.
Oh, man. Am I ever going to learn this?
I'm going to throw this one at you 3 more times, so just be ready. All right, keep going.
Okay, next slide. And so basically in all these things, what we're trying to do basically is we're trying to help the customer along the decision journey. Buying something is not a one-shot, one-time thing. Right? People first have to be aware of your product. They need to know it exists and they need to consider it. So you start at the bottom, right? And so you need to think about, for this particular group of customers, how do I make them aware that my product exists? How do I make them consider it? Do I need a billboard for that? Do I need to go to a trade show? Do I send a salesperson over? The next phase is the evaluate phase, where the customer evaluates multiple options. And so there, what you do is you think about what, for this group of customers, what kind of information do they need, in what format, and in what channel, what medium channel or what distribution channel. Then the final decision is made, the purchasing decision is made, the buy phase. And so there, the question is often, what do I need to push this customer just over that hurdle? What do I need to help them make that decision? For example, by taking away some risk in the decision, by giving a warranty, or by giving an extra discount. That might often be that thing that helps people over that hurdle. And then it's not done, right? At that point, you're looking at, how do people enjoy my product? Can I help them get more out of my product? And so that's where a company like AT&T, for example, has a lot of their activity. It's not in getting you to sign up, but in helping you to get the most out of their service, right? And so you can provide information about your product. You can provide new features. Then hopefully what happens is that your customer is so satisfied that they will advocate for your product, for example, online or word of mouth to their neighbors and friends. And so ideally, if that happens, people really bond with your product so that the next time they don't go through this whole elaborate decision process anymore, but they go through what's called this shortened loop, which is called the loyalty loop, right? Where they just rebuy from you because they've bonded with your company and really, really want to stay. And so that's one of the ways in which customer centricity really ends up being everywhere in that go-to-market strategy framework. And of course, it's very much in the segmentation, targeting, positioning as well. It's looking at, who are these people? What do they want? What do they need? What do we need to build for them?
You know, Josh, I want to turn to you. Following exactly on what Stijn was just talking about here, can you give us some insight into what kind of customer research or discovery you all do? Like, how do you integrate that voice of the customer into the go-to-market process?
Yeah, and Stijn really nailed this. There's an element of understanding the kind of the buying part of the experience, and I love that visual, Stijn, that you used. And then there's an element of caring for the customers that you have, and ultimately that's about building a connection so that they will continue to do business with you. Ultimately, for us, it's continuing to add connectivity services. We do a lot of different approaches. We use different approaches to understand the customer journey. We do call listening, we do journey mapping, we do ride days. I will tell you, learn more in an afternoon sitting with your frontline employees than you'll learn in a year. Just go out and ask them. They deal with all kinds of issues. And we do what's called episode models. And this is an example of an episode model that's on the chart here. And I call this the pain times frequency chart. It's a simple 2x2. And really what you look at is, how frequently do customers have an issue, which is the size of the bubble itself, and then how much pain is it when they have that issue? And sometimes there's no pain, sometimes there's a lot of pain. And what this does is it allows us to look deeper. It allows us to use more of a laser beam on the areas that are problematic for our customer and peel back the onion a layer or two. And the next slide just gives you a little bit more of what that peeling back the onion would look like. So in this case, on the left-hand side, we demonstrate, hey, when a customer has an issue, you can see the impact of CSAT from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 issues. So the key here is, hey, when you find that a customer has a problem, you better get underneath it quickly and resolve it and get it right the first time. The right-hand side starts to get at some of the more granular reasons that there would be an issue. And I won't read all of these, but these are the types of insights that help inform us on the big ticket investments that we make, whether it's transformation of our systems, which I talked about earlier, digital transformation. The AT&T guarantee is something that we've been very, very loud about and will continue to transform over time. Front end agent tools are great examples. So these are the types of items that we identify, and then we assign tactics to go and fix them.
So Josh, one thing that strikes me on the left is it seems really important to solve problems that come up like the first time. I'm even aware of some examples where if something goes wrong the first time and you immediately solve it, people end up being just as satisfied or even more satisfied than if nothing goes wrong. It's really, as you show on that graph, it's like where you go to 2, 3, 4 times that it really becomes painful.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one element of the products and services that we provide, core connectivity, is that they're almost invisible. They're like oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found is, sometimes things do go wrong. And if you recover well, to your point, satisfaction can almost increase over what you'd see if nothing happened at all.
Right.
And that example that I shared earlier with wireless backup is a great example of understanding these kinds of metrics and knowing that, hey, if we communicate to the customer that the backup is up and running, they may know they had an event, but they also know that we've got their back. And so it's intercepting that friction point and making it known that we've got a solution for them, and then ultimately addressing that solution quickly.
That's a great example because you basically have a problem with one of your products, and then another product makes that into a win instead of a loss, right?
Exactly.
It's almost better if there's an occasional failure of the fiber network.
Yeah. Sorry, gentlemen, I just jumped in here. Sorry, set me straight here. Which slide are we on? I had to jump.
Okay, we're on miscalculations and critical mistakes that companies make when aiming to be truly customer-centric, and how has this affected their ability to transform?
Oh, got it. Okay, good. Thank you.
So basically, what are the biggest mistakes that companies make? Josh, you want to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
I would say, one misconception that I think a lot of folks have is that the equation for success is just having the lowest price and doing a lot of advertising. When in reality, that's the wrong value exchange. Customers want solutions to their problems. And it's upon us to identify what those problems are and find creative ways, customer-centric ways to solve those problems. And, a good example, I talked about internet backup. That one's an interesting one. There's another example that recently we rolled out where we're meeting an unmet customer need, and that's tied to what we call split pay. And I'm a father of 3 adult kids, by the way.
Me too.
I didn't know that about you, Stijn. How old are your 3?
24, 22, and 16.
Okay. Do
your 16-year-old thinks she's an adult?
So do your adult children pay their own phone bill?
Yes.
Oh, you're ahead of most. So I pay the phone bill of all of my adult children. And what we learned is that there's a very large portion of the United States population that want the ability to split out a bill and have others kind of pay their freight. I, as an adult with adult children, want my children to be able to pay their bill. So we created this solution called Split Pay, where we can text my kids, hey, Riley, hey, little Josh, it's time to pay up. You owe whatever, $20 or whatever it is, their fair share. That's a great example of identifying an unmet need. And by the way, many customers were solving this on their own, but they were doing it with like Venmo, and so it's sensing those needs and solving those problems. It's not just about advertising or lowering the price.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the biggest mistakes that people make, one is trying to be all things to all people. An example that I love there is this really cool product that's made by a company, a Norwegian company called Remarkable, and they make these writing and sketching tablets. It's one tablet for writing and sketching. And, they could go after students or visual artists or professionals. And they ended up not serving any of these three very well because they basically came up with a compromised product that did some of the things that each of these three groups wanted, but didn't delight any of them. So, for example, for students, you would really need to be able to integrate this product with software like Canvas or what is it called, Blackboard, right? These college course platforms, and if it can't do that, it's not useful to that segment, and so that's how they lost. So don't try to be all things to all people. Make sure that there's a sizable group, at least one, that you're really delighting and satisfying better than the competition. Another big one, I think, is failing to look at the counterfactual, right? If you show somebody an ad and they buy, did they really buy because of your ad? What about the counterfactual here? Would they have bought if they hadn't seen the ad? In a lot of situations, they would have bought if they'd seen the ad as well, right? If you send somebody a retention offer and they stay, what's the probability that they would have stayed anyway had you not sent that offer? And so the bigger problem here is causality. What's the real impact of your actions? And so the second big mistake I see people make is to just assume that because two things occur together that they're causally related, right? If somebody saw an ad and bought, who knows? May not have been because of your ad at all.
Hey, you two, we've got just a few minutes left. I want to hit you with a lightning round challenge. Are either of you using artificial intelligence to work through some of the processes we've described today, go to market, customer lifetime value, I don't know, customer satisfaction, any of that stuff? Josh.
Yeah, Chris, I tried to drop little breadcrumbs on the technology front as we work through this, but I would say AI is embedded in almost all of the solutions that I referenced. Whether it's the calculation of LTVs or it's the front end tools that our experts use to deliver the right offer at the right time in the right language to meet a very specific segment, whether it's the BSS layer underneath that. AI is powering all of that. It's how we can deliver personalized solutions to customers and do it in an economical way.
Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. It's more sophisticated ad targeting, individualized pricing, individualized ads even, and also the predictive analytics, like who's going to churn and is not going to churn if I send them a retention offer. What are they going to want to buy based on their prior behaviors and the behavior of similar others, right? It's everywhere.
There you go. Audience, you know what to do next, right? Brush up on your AI integration as it relates to customer centricity. And there's so much more that we have covered here. Again, to go back to what we talked about in the introduction, a lot of everything that we've learned here, most of what we've learned here, is covered in Stein's eCornell online courses. Josh Goodell brought tremendous insight and totally unique insight. It's been lovely working with you both. Thanks, you two, for joining us today for keynotes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So audience, couple quick asks here. I want you to let us know how we did. Again, as I mentioned in the beginning, your feedback is critical to everything we do here. So we're going to pop up a QR code, a URL. Give us a quick survey. It's going to take 2 minutes. Please let us know how we're doing. We've shared some resources with you. Heads up for those in the chat as we leave here. Again, this is being recorded. This will be available moments afterwards. So if you want to share it with a colleague or a friend, the recording will be available on our website in perpetuity. So thanks again, gentlemen. Thanks again, audience. Lovely engagement. We'll see you next time on Cornell Keynotes.